Hey, it's Alex the Car Girl back for another visit to Molly. Like many of you who drive or race performance vehicles, I always like to learn more about my race car. Today I'm going to find out more about the bearings in my engine. Of course they're Clevite, and Arrington Performance said they looked as good as new when they went through and rebuilt my engine this winter. But I want to know more. That's why I have Bill McKnight here to shed some light on the subject. Bill has been the Clevite guide to racers all over the world, so what better place to start than asking him? So Bill, what's special about the bearings that are in my engine?
Well, Alex, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked me because bearings are my favorite subject. And when Arrington went through your engine, I supplied them Clevite H-Series race bearings that look just like these babies right here, okay? They're really good. But they don't come in cars today. Engines in cars, you can see these little tiny bearings here out of a Japanese car, or you can see these Ford factory service bearings here in the Ford box. They're made out of a material called bimetal aluminum. And the surface here, the shiny silver surface, is aluminum with a silicon alloy to it that's extremely hard and wears like iron. Okay. Matter of fact, I was bragging at lunch about my van having 270,000 miles on it. It's got bimetal aluminum bearings in it from the factory. They've never been touched. So that's the story for factory engines. Now, race engines like yours, you might think, well, man, why wouldn't I want those aluminum bearings, you know?
You'd think that you'd want long-lasting bearings.
Certainly, wear forever.
Right.
The problem is, in an engine, a V8, for instance, like yours, when you start making more than about 600 horsepower, you start doing crazy things to the inside of the engine. The firing pressure pushing the connecting rod down on the crankshaft is really high. And the bearing is the only thing between that crankshaft and the connecting rod other than a little film of oil.
Right.
So as the firing pressure gets higher, i.e. the horsepower is higher, we start stressing that film of oil. And it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And it can get to the point where the bearing will actually touch the crankshaft for an instant. Now, a very hard bearing, there's nothing to give, nothing to deform. If it touches the crankshaft, we're going to have aluminum bearing welded to the crankshaft, and a disaster will occur. Kaboom! And the engine blows up.
Okay.
The H-Series Clevite race bearings in your car, this material here is something called Babbitt. And it's a soft material. You can actually take your thumbnail and scratch this Babbitt with your thumbnail. And you'd think, well, that's not good, you know, it's going to wear out.
Doesn't seem good.
However, we're not looking for 170,000 miles out of your Dodge Magnum race car. You know, we're looking for that thing to survive. What'd you tell me it was dynoing now?
About 900.
900 horsepower, yes. So it's not about 170,000 miles. It's getting that engine to survive, making 900 horsepower, when at the factory it made about 345 or 350. So, you know, you've really cranked it up substantially.
Yeah.
So as the horsepower goes up over 600, we're looking for a race bearing, and those race bearings are softer than the factory bearings.
Got it.
So we sell a lot of them. Matter of fact, I was just on the phone this morning with a guy from one of the big 3 car manufacturers in the race department, and he was looking for Clevite bearings for an engine they're working on. So
They're the best.
they are. So did that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
How about more questions? Any other questions on bearing?
I think I do. So let me get this straight. This Babbitt coating, should the crankshaft come in contact with the bearing, this Babbitt coating is supposed to protect the engine a little bit further. Have I got that right?
Yeah. Matter of fact, the deal is the Babbitt is relatively soft material. Babbitt is actually made from a compound of tin and lead. And as I mentioned earlier, you can take your thumbnail and dig into it.
Right.
This is silicon aluminum. It is really hard. There's no way you're going to dig your thumbnail into this. Well, when the engine is running normally and there's not a lot of horsepower involved, these bearings, as I mentioned, they last forever. But when I start squeezing that oil film down in your 900 horsepower drag motor, we're going to get to the point where this bearing is going to touch the crankshaft for an instant. Because it's so hard, it will not deform, it won't squish, it won't move out of the road. It's going to hit that crankshaft, the oil film is gone, and when you have 2 metal parts rubbing each other, heat builds up.
Right.
And then we end up welding the bearing to the crankshaft. Now your race bearings, what happens there is the Babbitt's soft, it actually melts at 450 degrees. So if it starts to rub a little bit from that pressure of your crankshaft, it'll just wear down or it'll deform a little bit, and the engine keeps on going.
Okay. So Is it safe to say that the softer the bearing, the better for higher horsepower engines?
Yeah, matter of fact, you got it exactly right. I sell almost everyone out at the racetrack in Top Fuel and Funny Car, alcohol dragsters and alcohol funny cars, and they run a softer bearing than your engine is. It's really soft. But I'll give you an example. You're making 900 horsepower. Tony Schumacher's Top Fuel car is making 10,000 horsepower. Right. And the bearing size is not much different. Okay, well, that 10,000 horsepower creates 10,000 pounds per square inch of pressure on the bearing from the engine cylinder firing. Your engines may be 2,300 pounds of pressure. Well, that extra roughly 8,000 pounds of pressure is compromising the oil film.
Right.
Matter of fact, those dragsters run 4 seconds, bring them back, take the engine apart, and it looks like your mother took a rolling pin and flattened the centers of the rod bearings. They're literally expanded, sometimes 30, 40 thousandths from where they were when it started 4 seconds ago.
Which is why they rebuild them after every pass.
Exactly. But imagine if I sold them these aluminum bearings and they didn't deform at all. They wouldn't make it a 4 second run. They would weld to the crank. We'd have a big kaboom and about an hour and a half oil cleanup. You'd be down that road, and that would be all she wrote. I'd be looking for a job.
Yeah, you'd be in trouble.
Yeah, it'd be the end of live TV at NHRA. So now you have it.
All right. Well, I think that's all we have time for today, but this has been pretty interesting, and I learned a lot, so thank you.
Come back and we'll do some more.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds
thanks.
good. Thanks.
Yep.